Yesterday afternoon, I think it was yesterday afternoon, I got my, yes, it was 3:15. I got a text from the Taxpayers Union, an update saying Labour back in government in new poll, shock poll. Labour, Te Pāti Māori and the Greens would have enough seats to form the government. Well, if that wasn't bad enough news for the government, they then turned into TV1 last night, where the One News Varian poll said pretty much the same thing as the Taxpayer Union Curia poll, which suggested for the first time since elected that we've fallen out of love with the centre-right, well, I say we collectively, I mean New Zealand, with the centre-right coalition government, and in particular the National Party. The Greens, sorry, the New Zealand First and ACT Party votes have pretty much held up, but it is National letting the side down. That bloc has fallen to where they are just above Labour in the Taxpayer Union poll, but in actual fact below in the One News Varian poll. Not substantially, but enough to say, boy, if I've got to do nothing, which Labour have done for the last 15 months, and I'm still back in power, you've got to be really stuffing it up big time on the other side of that equation. Joining us to talk about the poll and the reasons why is the Taxpayer Union's Policy and Public Affairs Manager, James Ross. James, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Listen, you do these polls every month. You generally, I say you were the most accurate of all the pollsters leading into the last election. You headlined it a shock poll. Was it a shock poll, really?
Well, look, at the very least, I hope it's a shock poll for the politicians sat over in the beehive. I think Kiwis on the ground obviously know how they're feeling, and they know they're losing faith in the government. But this poll, it's got to be a wake-up call for Luxon and his government that people are getting a bit sick of the managed decline that they're offering.
And you've also suggested that one of the reasons is because certain government ministers are not doing their job properly. One of them is the Climate Change Minister, Simon Watts. Why have you taken particular aim at him?
Well, look, we've taken aim at Simon Watts. One, because we've just seen over the last couple of weeks they've doubled down on Jacinda Ardern and James Shaw's enormous Paris climate commitments. We were already looking at up to about $24 billion, which is about $12,000 per household. That's going to be larger now. The facts are no one has any idea how much that is. One, people look at that and see enormous costs. And two, of course, that's going to damage the economy long term. And we see in this poll, as we've seen in pretty much every poll over the last couple of years, that the economy and cost of living are top of people's minds. When Luxon's just come out a couple of weeks ago and said, every decision is going to be through the lens of economic growth, and then Simon Watts comes out and immediately, pops that balloon, you've got to question that. You've got to question where the heads of those ministers are.
Yes, and you're particularly upset that Simon Watts is not making himself available to you. You say of all of the ministers that are currently elected, that the Taxpayers Union have not been able to have a meeting or have access to him at all, despite your large membership and obviously the support you provided prior to the last election. Why do you think he doesn't want to meet you?
It's a very good question. There's two parts of that, I suppose. Why we're taking issue with it. He's the Minister of Revenue. We're the largest taxpayer group in the country, and he won't sit down and have a chat with us. But equally, he's the Climate Change Minister, and he won't sit down with the Fed. So I think it's just a lack of due diligence, and it's a lack of attention to his own portfolio, and not being willing to sit down with the stakeholders who might criticise his plans. If you're going to be an effective minister, you have to speak to both sides of the equation, not just take the easy route. And I think that's what Simon Watts has been trying to do.
He has been talking, though, to Local Government New Zealand, and we both know that they're a Wellington-based lefty organisation, and possibly woke. He'll talk to them, but he won't talk to you.
Again, look, we're affiliated with a number of large ratepayer groups. Clearly, we represent the interests of a lot of ratepayers, and the local government minister won't sit down and have a chat with us about that. But he will sit down in Charlie Noble. If you've seen his latest diary release, came out yesterday, I believe he will sit down in Charlie Noble with LGNZ, which on our side raises questions.
Okay. So he doesn't like you. Some ministers get a bee in their bonnet about particular lobby groups at the end of the day. That's fair enough. But what's not fair enough is when you're starting to lose support. And Christopher Luxon is not just losing support for his party, but his personal ratings aren't where they should be if he's going to be leading the country into the next election. Why do you suppose that Christopher Luxon's personal rating as Prime Minister is so poor?
Well, I suppose the first question you have to ask is what has Luxon actually done to differentiate himself from the last government? Spending has gone up, debt has gone up, deficits have gone up. We've just got a second, Jacinda Ardern, Chris Hipkins, Grant Robertson government. I think people are losing faith in that. People need to see some differentiation, and they need to see some actual results, which hopefully we'll see in Budget 2025. But if I was Christopher Luxon, I would be looking at my plans for that budget very, very carefully and seeing what I can do to deliver some actual economic growth.
Yeah, the thing though that's interesting about your poll is that the support that National are losing isn't, as you might expect, heading off into ACT or into New Zealand First, but it's going across the aisle. Why? What have Labour done to earn those recalcitrant National Party voters' support?
Yeah, it's a very good question. National have actually gained votes in this poll. They've gone up from they dipped below 30% last time to slightly above 30% this time. But we're talking about sort of margin of error changes for both them and Labour. So it's not that there's been any major change from National to Labour in this poll, but I think what we have seen is that belief that the country is going in the wrong direction is not only at almost historic lows, but continuing to dip.
Sorry, have we still got you, James?
Yep. Hello.
James, sorry. Can I just also say, though, is charisma an issue here, do you think? Is one of the reasons is that National don't have a very good front person, a good salesman, which is pretty essential, I would have thought, to any government?
To be honest with you, I've long said that I think this government's problem is that they believe they have a commerce problem when they actually have a policy problem. Their immediate response after the last bad poll was to come out and do some rebranding and to change some names of portfolios and to just, give what's already there a bit of a spit and polish. Comms isn't the issue. The issue is that there's no meat to the agenda and they're not delivering the growth that they were elected to.
And for yourself, for the Taxpayers Union, what's number one or number two, one and two, if you like, that you'd like to see in the budget that you think will regain the confidence of New Zealanders? Because at the end of the day, as you and I well know, no matter the charisma of a leader or whatever the policies might be, if the economy's not working, the economy's not working, and New Zealanders tend to vote according to who they think will fix it. What does Luxon and his side need to do in the coming election to fix the economy?